Yay! Okay, shall we? Almost 2 years anyway. Okay, here we are.
Hello.
Hello. We can wait a little bit for people to join us and get to take in your beautiful space.
Hello.
Oh my god, I love seeing all the comments.
Yay!
It's fun, right?
Hi.
Yeah. I wish everybody got to see the view that I get to see of this chest in front of us.
It's pretty good.
It's full of so many goodies. Okay, cool. Should we introduce ourselves?
Sure.
Awesome. Hello, I am Andrea. I'm a somatic and trauma therapist, and I live on occupied Lenape territory in New York City. And I'm so fucking excited about this. I've been looking forward to having this talk for a long time and very grateful to be joined by you.
Yes. I'm Christine, and I am a polyamorous person, which is why I think Andrea asked me to be on here.
Yes.
And I wrote a zine called Linked about polyamory and my experiences and my philosophies and ideals about relationships. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that.
Yes. And Linked is such an incredible resource. I cannot recommend it enough. And I really do tell so many of my clients and friends to check it out. There are like very few things that are written about polyamory that are more up to date.
Yeah.
And also like go into it in the depth that you do, and it's less 101 and more like here's some other thoughts on this if you are already like if this is already part of your life.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that it's an intro resource, but it covers a lot of ground. So if you're into getting up to speed pretty quickly, then it's good for you.
Yes. Yes, awesome. So we were just going to get started with some intro to polyamory and open relationships and what all of that means. How would you define the difference between polyamory and an open relationship?
I think that everyone has a different idea of what these terms mean, but I would say polyamory is kind of like an umbrella term, and having an open relationship is like one kind of that. A distinction that I would make personally is that, it's the other way around. Open relationships and polyamory. So polyamory is more like you're having relationships and connections that are more than just sexual. And a lot of the times when I hear people say they're in an open relationship, there's a lot of, it's like, oh, I have sex with other people, and there's a lot of constraints around partnership and having multiple partners.
Cool. It's a great definition. Thank you. So we wanted to jump in. This could be a whole hour of like 101 stuff, and just talk more directly about what is the healing potential that open relationships and polyamory offer us. And something that we talked about before we jumped on here was how that can be said about any relationship. Like all relationships have the capacity to be healing and have the opportunity for us to understand our attachment style and our nervous systems and the way we show up when we're at our most vulnerable, which is also the place in which there can be the most change and healing. The thing that we're specifically going to talk about today is the specific opportunities that polyamory and open relationships have for that, because there have been less conversations about this. Like there are not examples in attachment books about polyamory and open relationships.
Yeah.
So we have to do this work because it hasn't been done yet. So this in no way is saying like this is the only way to heal your attachment system or this is the most radical way to have a relationship, but more that this hasn't been a conversation that's been had. Or it has been had and not in relation to a lot of attachment theory.
Yeah. So another note to that is that polyamory is not like, this is not an advertisement saying this is the only way. And I know a lot of the comments on your post were about that, but it's one way to have relationships, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. No one is saying you have to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I like to, and the way that my experience in doing polyamory is having multiple full-on relationships at the same time. So that's kind of where I'm speaking from. And so the thing that really makes it kind of kickstart, high speed, overdrive your own healing and your attachment style is that you're not just dealing with one person, you're dealing with multiple people at the same time. And so everyone is bringing different attachment styles and trauma and, everything to the table at the same time. And so that kind of forces you to do your own work and work with your partners on, getting through a lot of different histories of trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. It is like it can speed things up, or even there's more of a need to do that work because there are more people involved.
Right.
And then again, like that's not to say that in monogamous relationships that work isn't important as well. Yeah. I think that what can happen in some monogamous relationships is that you can avoid this stuff for a lot longer, where in open relationships and polyamory, there is more, you don't have as much of an option to avoid. And if you do, I do think things fall apart a lot more quickly than in monogamy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely easy to kind of avoid and get comfortable in relationships where there's only two people. But if you're orienting towards many people, it's a lot more likely that it's going to bring stuff up for you, especially around like the ideas of jealousy and scarcity and all of the stuff that we learn growing up about romance culture that's really toxic that we have to unlearn, that is then related to our attachment styles.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah, and that like within open relationships and polyamory, you will discover a lot of things about your attachment style because you're having different attachments with different kinds of people. So when I think about attachment styles, we do tend to have one that we default to the most, but depending on the relationship, we can be a completely different attachment style. Also, some relationships can shift between, like one person is the more anxiously attuned person and the other person is more avoidant, and then the next thing you know, it's like switch. So it really, like that happens a lot as well. And I do think that the thing with polyamory and open relationships is that you can have one relationship where you're healing your anxiously attached part, and then you can have another relationship where you're healing your avoidant part. And so all of that work can kind of be existing at the same time. And also you can really be witnessing the way that you show up differently in different kinds of relationships depending on the other person's attachment, or even the way that they, using like imago couples therapy ideas, the way that they may remind you of caregivers or people in your life. Everybody brings out something different from us because of the way that they may or may not remind us of someone who's cared for us in the past. And that could be like a parent or a babysitter or a sibling or whatever.
Wow. That's a lot to think about. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, Imago is really, really cool. I recommend it to everybody. There needs to be like a queer Imago book written because the one that's written is called Getting the Love You Want, and it's so heteronormative and horrifying. But the theory of Imago is really, really interesting, and it can be like either your partner or your partners can remind you like exactly of someone, or it can even just be the way that they like laugh that can remind you of someone. There's like a lot of like pre-conscious or like pre-memory stuff that we just like don't have access to knowing about, that our attachment systems like light up. It's why you like hear somebody laugh, or you like meet somebody and you like smell them or whatever and you're like, this person, like that's probably because of like a pre-memory implicit memory that's in our body.
I'm gonna research that.
Yeah. It's so fun.
But going back to what you were saying before, my personal experience, like when I started doing polyamory and having multiple partners at the same time, versus when I was monogamous, was that I felt very stagnated and I wasn't like, I would get out of a relationship that I had for years and be like, oh, I feel like I didn't really grow. And then as soon as I started doing polyamory, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm learning all of these things about myself and how I relate to other people and how I relate to, jealousy and just sharing my things. And I learned a lot about myself, and that feeling of just constantly like having to do work and being checked on stuff, I kind of like really craved that. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings so much to the surface, and there is such an opportunity. I mean, I think, we can lose ourselves in all kinds of relationships, but it is really true that if you have someone else who you're in relationship with, there's more of a protective factor in being like, hey, you don't really seem happy in this relationship, or even, like, if you're dating someone who treats you like so-so, and then you're dating someone who treats you amazing, you're not going to stay with the so-so person.
Oh, my God. That's probably one of the best things.
Yeah. Yeah, you're getting to have the experience of, like, this is how it could be. Why would I stay with this other person who, like, shames my kink or doesn't listen to me or isn't affectionate in the way that I need when I could be with this other person or other people like them?
Right.
Yeah. So that's
I talk about that a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely a benefit for sure.
Yeah, having multiple partners definitely highlights what you're maybe missing or like what's just like, that doesn't work for me. And I know because I have this great example of what does work for me. That's happening right now and reminding me every day.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that also like makes me think about the other opportunities that come up from having different partners who are interested in different things is you really do get to cultivate these different parts of yourself, whether it's sexually or like both with like specific sexual interests or even like sexuality, getting to date people of different genders, getting to date people of different life experiences. Maybe you get to date somebody who is a reader like you are, and then your other partner is really interested in cooking, but those two things don't come together in those two, and then you can cultivate those parts of yourself in those relationships. That's kind of like a very surface level vanilla example, but you can insert whatever you want into that, I guess. Yeah. So, I guess, should we talk about hierarchy?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So within the polyamory umbrella, there are many different ways that, it's like kind of like design your own relationship and you have to figure out what works for you. But there are kind of like two different structures, and it's based on whether you practice hierarchy in your relationships. And what I mean by that is that it might sound familiar for people to think about polyamory like, oh, you're a couple, you have a primary partner, you are doing this together as a team, and then everyone else that is kind of in your circle or that you're dating or you're orbiting are like not primary, and you call them whatever you want, other partners, secondary partners, lovers, etc. And then there's the idea of non-hierarchical polyamory, which kind of has a lot of like anarchist undertones to it, which is you strive very hard to treat all of your relationships kind of as if they are equal. And that has a lot of like, oh, how do you do that? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But it's like, if you have multiple partners, you kind of like, you just don't pick one that is always like, this person like comes to my doctor's appointments with me and like does all of the most important things in my life with me, and then these other partners do this. It's kind of like, oh, this person can do this day, this person can do this another day. You can choose to live with someone, not be primary partners, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of unlearning, like just choosing a person and going with it. But if that is the ideal structure for you, it's like the work is definitely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's also like, that's one of the ways I think that polyamory and open relationships can be very radical, is that you are undoing the way that outside structures can show up within your relationships. So like the way that there's so much hierarchy in the world, and then actively practicing not having that hierarchy with your lovers or with your partners is a really radical and beautiful thing to do. And then it also really helps you not do the like escalator version of relationships, which is essentially like you meet somebody, you fall in love, you get an apartment together, you get married, you have children, this like and then versus like, oh, well, this partner I really want to live with because I think we'd be really good domestic partners, and then this partner I really want to travel with, this partner I want to have a child with, and you can have more complexity in those relationships around like who is the right fit for this component of my life, instead of like, well, this person I met and fell in love, so I guess we're just gonna like...
You have to do everything.
Right, right, yeah.
There is a comment that's really great, and I would affirm that and add that the non-hierarchical relationships is, for a lot of people, about kind of like, I don't come into like what I'm looking for and like have a box to check. It's like, oh, I meet people and I have kind of like an open idea, like we will form connections in whatever way is good for us, and there's no limit or restraint on how you make connections and what a person can become to you. So it's like, oh, I already have a primary partner, so like you can't be that. Yeah,
that's incredibly limiting.
Yeah.
Right. And then it also makes your secondary and tertiary partners feel like crap.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, so then how do you not do hierarchy?
Yeah, so, I think that it depends on what works for you. I can say that for me, like, this style works for me very specifically because I'm super independent.
Yeah, totally.
And, like, I don't want to live with partners, so it's, like, it's a lot easier for me to kind of, like, you know, like, I can have anyone over my house whenever I want, and I can, like, there's not a lot of limitations on what, for me, in what I want to do, but I would just say that you kind of just have to get really committed to making sure that everyone is feeling, like, good and not secondary, checking in a lot, really mixing up, like, I mean, priorities are a thing and they're going to exist no matter what kind of relationship structure you're in. So, like, for example, if I'm dating someone for years and then, like, someone new comes along, like, of course I'm not going to automatically give a new person the same priority that I'm giving my partner of, like, 6 years or whatever. So it's just, like, finding little ways to, like, let someone in that, like, shows them that they're not, like, there is potential for you to be a bigger part of my life. And that takes time and trust and work. But yeah, beyond that, it's just, like, a lot of effort and, like, being aware of, like, how you're treating people all the time, which you should do anyway.
Yeah, also, right. That's also really helpful.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. I'm also thinking about, like, more trauma-aware polyamory, and not to say that relationship anarchy is the, like, only or best way. Again, like, these are just ideas, but, and it's different for everybody, but that if your trauma is around being secondary, so, like, maybe it's being, like, on the lowest rung of your family when you were growing up, or, like, always coming second to a sibling, or, not being prioritized, then getting to have the experience of there being more of that balance in the relationship structure can also be really healing and helpful.
Right.
And to have somebody who is actively thinking about prioritizing you and making sure that you don't feel left out, making sure that you feel attended to, like, how healing that is after not experiencing that as a child.
Right.
Yeah. So that, cool. Okay, we were talking, this is, like, a good in for ideology versus internal experience.
Yeah.
I feel like.
So, the idea of, like, especially when people first get started in practicing these kind of relationships, but, I mean, it could be at any time because everyone's different, but, a lot of people have a really hard time, like, with like, oh, I really want to do this and I want to like, intellectually, polyamory makes a lot of sense for me. It aligns with my values and my ideals, but then internally, you have a lot of trouble and you're like going through it. There is a lot of like wild feelings and jealousy. And how do you get your ideology to match up with what is going on inside you? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I think also, like, this is a good in for us to talk about, like, what do you do if you practice polyamory and open relationships and it doesn't work for you?
Yeah.
And so, like, there's, like, two different conversations within that. So, especially if you're a trauma survivor, especially if you've had really negative experiences in past relationships, or maybe you have a more anxious attachment style and spending the night away from a partner feels intolerable, or knowing that they're with another partner feels intolerable. So there's like the one direction of learning to cope and soothe, and then also connected to that, you can also decide that it isn't for you and your attachment style. And I think regardless of what that decision is, you will walk away understanding yourself on a deeper level, having tried this. And it's not to say like this is the only way to learn about your attachment system, but if it's something that you're curious about anyways, the pressure of like this has to work can be really harmful when really it is certainly not for everybody's attachment system, and that's totally okay. But if your ideology is very much like this is the way that I want to be in relationship, and your nervous system is like, oh, I don't think so, or your attachment system is like, no, we're not going to do that. I would definitely suggest talking with your partners and also with your therapist or with yourself or whatever about what needs to be in place for you to be able to manage those like overwhelming feelings. And so, for example, if it's like spending a night away from your partner feels intolerable because it's really difficult to sleep alone, or the idea of them being somewhere else is really difficult, like what do you need on that night to soothe? Like, and again, it's like if you're someone who only ever feels comfortable sleeping next to your partner, this is a beautiful opportunity for you to be able to auto-regulate and learn to regulate and soothe on your own anyways. Like that will serve you in your whole life because your partner will have to sleep away from you at some point, / like I think most people do desire to be able to manage a night alone, right? So maybe it's like having a special recipe picked out that you cook that night, having your friends sleep over, if you have another partner planning something with them that night, any sort of like grounding activities, whether it's like movement, essential oils, watching a favorite movie of yours, a weighted blanket, like these are all things that you can do for yourself to manage on like a more somatic level. And then maybe you and your partner have some sort of practice of grounding before they leave for their date. Maybe there's something that you need to hear. Maybe there's something that you can like put your hands on a certain part of your body and ground with. So like, I'm enough, they're coming back. This isn't the end of our relationship. This is just a sleepover, like whatever it is that you need to hear.
Right. And I think like from my experience in my first polyamorous relationship where I kind of freaked out a little bit, just like remembering inside yourself, even though it's probably really hard, like compassion and like the other people are involved in this, and like texting your partner like, I need you home right now, like
yeah,
you're ruining their date with someone else who's like maybe not super into having their date ruined.
Yeah, who's also a person.
Yeah, who's also a person. So a thing that I like to say is like your partners have feelings, and just remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And another thing is like people have a lot of shame around like not being able to do the thing, and I think that it's super helpful, even though it might be really hard, to just fucking name it, just talk about it and say like, I'm feeling jealous, or like, yeah, I need this from you and can you give that to me? And hopefully, the answer is yes and everything's great.
Right.
But it might be no, and that's something that you can navigate too.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, this is something that I think is helpful if you're feeling pretty distressed, but not like extremely distressed, but focusing on what the sensations are that you're feeling. So like if I think, just to keep using this example, because I think it's a really relatable one, say that you're your partner is going on a sleepover and like your hands are shaking and your heart is racing and you're sick to your stomach, dropping the story of like, I'm being abandoned or like, they're leaving, what's going to happen? And just staying with the sensations of your hands shaking, of your heart racing, of the feeling sick to your stomach, and seeing what happens when you just listen. And even like something that I feel it's really helpful to say, for me at least, is like, oh, this is what my attachment system feels like. And like being curious about that and being interested in that instead of being like, oh God, like this, like letting the physical sensations overwhelm you with the sort of cognitive part. So letting go of the cognitions behind all of that, especially if your ideology is like, I believe in this, like I want my partner to go have another date, like that would make me so happy, but then your body is like, I think just sort of listening to your body and letting it do its thing, whether it's like letting yourself shake more or like breathing, or again, like really, really hyper paying attention to the internal sensations and kind of seeing where they go.
I think this might be a good segue into talking about jealousy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is probably the number one question that when someone who's polyamorous is like, I'm polyamorous, lots of people are like, oh my goodness, don't you get jealous? And the answer is yes. Just like, you know, it's like everyone gets jealous, almost everyone, maybe. And so it's just like we talk about that, and we have ways of coping with jealousy that, I mean, it's like a practice. You have to deal with it more. So you don't just run away and like don't think about it. You think about it and you sit with it and you listen to what it's telling you. And so a thing that I like to say about jealousy is that it's usually coming up to tell you about a need that you're not getting. And if you, I mean, it's like taking practice, like getting to know all of this other stuff about yourself. You get to know your jealousy, and if you're feeling a certain way, you can kind of learn to detect like, oh, I'm really jealous. I don't know, my partner went on vacation with someone else. Like, maybe that is not the actual feeling. And if you sit with it, you'll figure out like, oh, well, we didn't get to spend any time together before they left. And like, maybe if I request that, you know, we have like a really special date when they get back, like that would make me feel better.
Yeah, totally. And I think like the jealousy being like a compass to lead you to a wound. And so maybe it's a wound that you want to work on through polyamory, or maybe it's like, oh no, this is like not going to work for me. So if the wound is like, I'm scared of abandonment, and then like time and time again, it still feels like abandonment, that's a way to identify what the wound is for you. And again, like polyamory could be a way for you to heal that. It also could be a way to lead you to therapy or to like another kind of healing for yourself. So yeah, like, or even dealing with insecurities that you may never have been able to confront in a monogamous relationship. Again, whether or not you decide that polyamory is for you, it is an opportunity to learn what those are.
Right. The flashlight comes out.
Yeah.
Gets shined right on you and all of your insecurities.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
The amount of people I know that are like newly into polyamory that are like, well, I'm going to therapy now. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's true. Poly people love therapy. Can confirm. Which is great. I mean, there's a reason for that. Like, there's a reason that my practice is oftentimes very full of people who practice this way of loving, is because they cannot avoid these attachment wounds.
Yeah.
Because they're coming up in such a bigger way because there are more people and because of jealousy or because of fear of abandonment. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So coping, we don't know why you're jealous. Oh yeah, maybe we can talk about rules versus boundaries.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So the other thing that I think is really popular for, people to, maybe when they're first starting out, or who practice more hierarchical relationship structures is to have a lot of rules in their relationship, which is literally like, this is what you're allowed to do, and you can't do these things. And I like to, I specifically talk about these because I come from having practiced non-hierarchical relationship structures. So thinking about, like, I personally don't want to put rules on anyone with what they're allowed to do with other people in their life ever. So it's more of like, okay, I don't want to limit you and what you're doing. That would be a rule. I want to use boundaries and say, like, flip it around a little bit and say, I need this to be comfortable. And those are two very different things. And,
yeah. Oh, I love that. Totally.
Yeah. So one of them is kind of like imposing onto other people. And the other one is like thinking about your own needs and, boundaries. And agreements are kind of like in the middle line, like, if you're agreeing between the two of you that, like, you're going to use barriers when you have sex, like, you're technically not controlling someone else, but it is, like, limiting what someone can do with other people, but it's like, so there's, like, gets a little gray area in some places, but I mostly like to say that boundaries are better than rules.
Yeah, I like boundary a lot better too.
Yeah.
Can you think of an example of the difference between a boundary and a rule?
Let's
I like
see.
the barriers one is good for, like, the agreement, but I'm just thinking about, like, because I think this is a really important piece.
Yeah. So,
And also, something that you write about in Linked too is that a rule is like, we have this no matter what, and boundaries can be negotiated.
Yeah.
Those are just, like, different.
Yeah. Definitely negotiable. Oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of, I'm like, a rule. What's that?
That's awesome. So foreign.
Yeah. Like, okay. So rule would be like, if you're going to make out, or if you're going to flirt with someone or make out with someone, like, you have to tell me first. So that is a rule that's pretty easy to break.
That's true, right?
But you can say, like, okay, so a boundary for me is if you have a crush on someone, I want you to be able to tell me and talk to me about it. And it would feel really good to have that information and have open conversation about it, versus like, hey, excuse me, before I make out with you, I have to make a phone call to my partner.
Because I said that I would. It's a rule.
Yeah. It's a rule.
Yeah. So boundaries, it sounds like in boundaries there's also, like, more room to be a human and have, like, life experiences that, like, things happen and there can be a little bit more fluidity.
Yeah.
While also, like, still getting your needs met, which is, like, if you have a crush on someone, I would like to know who that is.
Yeah.
However, you don't have to, like, call me mid-makeout and, like, tell me.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Someone commented earlier, and I, like, love this connection so much. And it's also funny because someone said polyamory triggers the polyvagal nerve. Yes, absolutely. And this is really exciting for two reasons. The first one is that whenever I talk about the polyvagal theory, a lot of people are like, oh, yes, polyamory. And I'm like, they're actually not related in that way, but they both poly meaning many.
Right.
No. There we go. Okay, so in the polyvagal theory, which really quickly is this idea of thinking about our nervous system, like a ladder, and at the top of the ladder is the place of safety and connection and groundedness, and that nerve is the ventral vagal nerve, and the ventral vagal nerve is stimulated through connection. And so connection can happen with ourselves, it can happen with nature, it can happen with animals, but it most effectively, or like is, I would say, like, there's the most drastic sort of like significant activation does come from human connection. Like, we are we literally have to connect to survive. So that's why, not to say that like connecting with yourself or others isn't really valuable as well, but so within polyamory, you also have a lot of deep connections, and you have not only relationships with your multiple partners, but you also have relationships with their partners, and then maybe you also have a larger poly community or a poly family. And so when we have more connections, we get to stay closer to the top of our ladder and feel that activation of that nerve because of the connection that we're experiencing in our lives. Yeah, so I'm glad that someone highlighted that. I think that's very cool. And also, like, similarly to kink and BDSM, at the top of the ladder is the safety and connection zone. The middle is the sympathetic fight or flight, and then at the bottom is the dorsal, and which is the more like collapse, submit response. And I think that, similar to BDSM, polyamory does offer us this opportunity to fluctuate between those states in ways that could be that like offer opportunities for regulation. So again, it's like, okay, let's say that your partner is going on their sleepover and you're noticing that you're in like a sympathetic fight or flight state. And again, your ideology is, I want my partner to go on this date. Like, I'm so excited, but my body's having this sympathetic response. It gives you an opportunity to learn to regulate that response. Mm-hmm. So it's also does provide the sort of like nervous system healing opportunity as well. Cool. Let's see. We also were going to talk about, how to try polyamory after a bad experience.
Oh, yeah. I didn't talk about this. If anyone has read Linked, I kind of talk about it in the zine. But I unfortunately would say that most people have had at least one really bad experience in doing polyamorous relationships, and that's like for a lot of reasons. This is not like, we don't learn how to do these relationships. Mm-hmm. We're coming from a society that tells us if you have more than one partner, you're cheating. It's like not natural, it's wrong. So there's a lot to learn and unlearn in doing this. So the first time you do it, you're kind of going in with, at least I was going in without a lot of education around any of this stuff. Even if you read a book, it's still not, like, it's not enough. You just have to practice it. So bad experiences happen. Just like in any community, there are people who are, and this is like coming from experience and people I know, like, you don't know what you're doing and you meet someone who's like, I've been doing this forever and like, this is the right way to do it. And then they turn out to be a really bad person maybe. And like, you get lied to, you get probably cheated on and
which is, will you give a definition of that?
Right. So poly cheating is, you can get cheated on in these types of relationships, and that's if it's basically a breach of trust. Mm-hmm. If someone crosses your boundary or goes on dates and they're not telling you, or any kind of like agreement or boundary that you have set and someone doesn't respect that, then it's the same as cheating in a monogamous relationship to us. So, being lied to about like how much time your partner is spending with someone else, or like what they're doing together, or if they're having sex or they're not having sex, that kind of stuff. Trust is a huge, huge part of these relationships. Wait, where was I going before? I'm on this tangent.
Yes. Bad experiences.
Oh, yeah.
If you got poly cheated on.
Right. So, if you've had a bad experience, that really, really sucks, but most of us have. Mm-hmm. And I would just say that, like, you just kind of, like, I don't know, you kind of, like, get to practice, like, what's right and what's not right, especially for you. And like, it's easy when you're starting out for someone to be like, to basically tell you that these things are how it's done. And I mean, that's not true for everyone. So kind of like paving your own way, dating more people, figuring out what works for you, and you eventually get the hang of it, and you figure out like, oh no, I don't want to date someone who already has a primary partner. Like I don't want to be one of 10 and like get to see you one day every 2 months, like that kind of thing. So which is, you know, not everyone's experience, but I would say that it really sucks and you're not alone, and you just have to kind of get back on the horse and meet people who don't suck.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, totally. Right, so we all, like, at the beginning, it's very common for there to be bad experiences as people are figuring it out, or if you, like, end up going on dates with someone who is using polyamory as a way to, like, hurt or manipulate people. Right. But that if you're basically just, like, with dating, because, like, monogamously all dating, you will meet bad people, and then you will hopefully eventually meet good people who are good for you.
And I like to think about the idea of, like, making your, like, I don't know, it has a lot to do with, like, compassion and, like, meeting people where they're at. And if you're just, like, not, if the person that hurt you or, like, you had a really bad experience with was just, like, just not ready to meet you where you were at, or, like, doesn't understand, like, have human compassion and, like, have to, you know, because it does take a lot of work. So if someone is, like you said, is using this as an excuse to just, like, go around and be reckless and hurt people, which happens, it's really easy to say, like, I'm polyamorous, and then just, like, go around, like, doing whatever you want and, like, using that as an excuse. And, like, there's a lot of ethics behind this that are, that just, like, you know, not everyone does it that way, and you just have to kind of find the people who are, like, practicing in a way that aligns with your ethics.
Right, totally. Yeah. I'm also thinking about a question that someone asked around how to make polyamory accessible. If you're someone dealing with chronic pain or disability, or even, like, as a trauma survivor, how to make polyamory accessible. And I think that similar to having other components of your identity that either you share or don't share with a partner, that they need to have a really deep understanding of what that looks like for you, and do their own self-education around whether, again, you're a trauma survivor or you have chronic pain or chronic illness, that it's, you know, it can be helpful to point your partners in a direction of how they can educate themselves, but that it is ultimately up to them to educate themselves in what your life experience is like. So I think that's definitely a really important way to make this accessible. Like, if you have low spoons, low energy for relationships, but you do want to practice in a polyamorous way, the people that you date need to either, like, have a similar life experience or really understand the nuance of that, and probably, like, make more effort to come to your house, or like, check in at the beginning of a date about what your energy level is. And again, like, those things also apply if you're monogamous as well. And then I think if you're a trauma survivor or you're dating a trauma survivor, both, like, again, in monogamy or in polyamory, educating helping your partner understand what that means for you, because being a trauma survivor is really different for every person. And so developing an understanding for your triggers and sharing that with a partner or your partners. And again, one of the really nice things about polyamory is that you do have more people to support you.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. Do you want to say more about
more people to support you?
Yes.
I had a thought. Where did it go? I don't know. I lost it.
Talking about, like, you have, but, like, both of you, deal with chronic pain and chronic illness, or if you are a trauma survivor, that you do have more people in your corner. And so, like, if something happens and you need to have that, like, okay, I'm going to text my person, like, in this situation, you would be able to text multiple people, or have, like, people share, like, a care calendar for you.
Right.
Or, like, multiple people who, like, again, like, if you're a a survivor, like, having eyes on you to be like, oh, I feel like, you know, they can also be part of your healing and care team as well.
Right. I remembered I was going to talk about communication.
Yes. Yes, that.
Yeah, so, again, like, totally valid for all, there's a little fly in here, all relationships. Hopefully, you know, everyone in any kind of relationship is really into communication, but these polyamorous relationships kind of force you to be even overly communicative, and doing that, at least for me, that's been really helpful in healing my own attachment style and trauma, because I have to, like, tell people what I need. I have to be honest first with myself and then with other people. And whereas, like, previously, before I was doing this, it was just, I wouldn't say anything. So I think that communication is kind of, like, dialed up a lot, just because you are navigating, like, all of these different people's feelings and all of these different people's boundaries and what everyone needs. So you're inherently talking all of the time. And so, like, in relation to, like, making polyamory accessible, I think it's, like, really great for just upping communication and really getting to know yourself and what you need and how you need it, and then being able to ask for that, which I think a lot of people that have different kinds of disabilities are really good at anyway. So yeah, communication.
Yes. And, like, also for trauma survivors who don't feel like they have a voice or have been made to feel like they don't have a voice, or, like, if they state a need, something really bad is going to happen, which I feel like is really common. This is an experience that you can have in which you get to have a mismatch experience where someone being like, no, I want to know what your needs are. I want to hear what your experience is. How different that is from maybe a relationship with a previous partner or family members who are like, we don't care about your experience, or your needs are invalid, or you need too much, or you're whatever. And so having a person, multiple people be legitimately interested in meeting your needs and hearing your experiences and caring about your feelings, that is such a different experience. And again, like, that can happen in a monogamous relationship as well. The thing that we're focusing on with this is that within polyamory, there are more people doing that, and there's also more of a need often for that to be a component of the relationship.
Right. To be just talking about those things all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, maybe we can think of, are there other things that you want to cover before we ask?
Oh, how to deal with challenging metamours.
Oh, that
sounds good. Someone asked, what's a metamour?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where these words come from, but it basically, metamour is, like, a word that you call your partner's partner, which, like, I usually just say partner's partner, or, like, girlfriend's girlfriend, or, like, whatever. So I think it's more fun, but metamour is, like, the kind of term that the community at large uses. And dealing with challenging metamours. Wow, we have 10 minutes left. No, I actually haven't had too much experience with this. Everyone is great. So, yeah, I mean, this is a huge deal, especially, like, if you're, so in my world, in my life, I don't believe in telling people what to do. So, like, I don't have veto power over who my partners get to date. People like to do that, and that's, like, a kind of like a safety out. Like, if I'm feeling really bad, if I'm feeling really insecure, if I'm this or that, I can't take it anymore, I get to have the power to veto who my partner is dating. I think that's really cruel, and I don't like it. I think that the way, honestly, like, this is really idealistic of me to say, but I think that the way that you get around that is, like, just being really discerning about who you're dating and who you trust, so that, like, I trust that my partners are going to date good people, and if there's conflict, like, we're going to talk about it, and, you know, And if it doesn't work out, then I trust that they're going to do the right thing.
Right.
And, you know, maybe that's not happening for you and there's a big problem and you just realize like, oh, my values don't align with my partner's and they're not the person I thought they were. But I have a really hard time with thinking that I have a say in who anyone else is dating. That's just, like, not something that I want.
Totally. I'm also thinking about how, like, more people, aka, like, your partner having a partner, means more attachment styles. And so if you have a challenge with a Metamour, it's probably because there's something about your attachment stuff that's coming up.
Yeah.
And I also want to validate that, like, sometimes your partners date people who are abusive, or sometimes your partners date people who are really, really toxic and, like, need to be in therapy or need to be, like, unlearning ways of loving that they have learned from their toxic and abusive family members. So just that too. But, you know, if the person if your partner's partner, it's not that, it's something else, there's just something about you that really, like, gets you or is really activating, like, there's probably some answer that you can find in your attachment or nervous system that you can address. And I think having people who aren't your partner to talk about that with, for example, a therapist, is really helpful to figure out what that is, and heal it yourself. Or, like, you know, it's, if you live in a place where there are polyamorous affirming therapists, like, you can go see a therapist with your Metamour. Like, if that's the route that you want to go, like, this is another relationship that you can do healing within, if that's what you want to do.
Right. And, you know, there's, like, different ideas around, like, and boundaries around, do I want or need to be friends with the people that my partner is dating?
Yeah.
And it's okay to not be. You know, you should be nice, but you don't have to be friends with the people that your partner is dating. And that might be also, like, be a mismatch. Like, if you're dating someone who's like, I want to have family day hangouts, and you're like, that's really not for me, that might be something that's, like, incompatible. This is another thing about polyamory, is that you realize very quickly if you're compatible with someone, based on their, like, how they have these relationships and what kinds of things that they need. But yeah, you don't have to be friends with your Metamour. You could be best friends with them. You could also be dating them. It's up to you.
Yeah. Totally.
And yeah, like the idea that people will tell you, like, you have to do this thing because this is the right way, that's all bullshit. So, like, if someone's telling you, like, you have to be friends with my girlfriend because, you know, that's the way to be polyamorous, like, that's not actually true. Right. And you're allowed to do whatever you want.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Someone asked if there's a network of polyamory affirming therapists. So on my page, I have a highlight on how to find a therapist who is affirming for whatever identity you may be looking to be affirmed. And then also, if you're in New York City, Manhattan Alternative is a really incredible list of therapists who are, like, mostly queer, kink, and polyamory affirming. But also, you know, like, if you're living in a place where, like, there is certainly not a therapist who can affirm that aspect of your identity, if the therapist is willing to do research on their own time, so not asking you to educate them, but, for example, being, like, on the phone with a potential therapist and saying, would you be okay reading The Ethical Slut before we work together? And if the therapist is like, yes, absolutely, then, like, I'm sure that, you know, like, hopefully that relationship would work out. But if they're like, oh, no, I don't know about that, then, like, it's definitely not going to be a good fit. So, yeah.
Someone said that there's a list, a checkbox on Psychology Today.
Oh, that's cool. Good. I did not know that box was
awesome.
On there. Great.
Yeah.
There you go. I guess before we run out of time, is there anything else that because they're going to cut us off in a few minutes.
Let's see. I think, did we talk about, like talking about your attachment, I don't think we talked about this, in how in relationships you're, like, you might have completely opposite in your oh god, what's the word? I read one therapy book and I'm trying to remember the word. when you're activated,
yeah.
your like attachment style and your trauma needs one thing, and like your partners needs something completely different, and so you're like, so-and-so doesn't care about me, and like, oh, my partner doesn't care about me, but you're actually just activated and you're doing things that, you know, the other one needs you to do something you can't do.
Right.
And sometimes that happens for both people at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when our younger selves or our younger parts get triggered, we will do whatever we need to do to get safety. I really like the framework of internal family systems for this, which talks about the firefighter parts, which are like the parts that are like, burn it to the ground, like break it with that person, like delete their phone number. And that's like, that is the way that we, this is internal family systems. You can buy any book on internal family systems and learn about this. I really like the workbooks, but yeah, like we will do anything to get safety. And that can also look like screaming and crying outside of your like lover's door, being like, I need you. Like that's the like, that is like the final sort of like line of protection to like get your needs met, whether it's like deleting the phone number or like screaming and crying. And so we all contain these different parts and they all get triggered in relationship. But it's true, like I think being more somatically and cognitively aware of when that's happening. So being like, oh, I'm sick to my stomach. This is my like abandonment part. I'm probably about to like text my partner like, go fuck yourself. And so we the more we know, the more we can be in control or predict our behavior or like be aware of what's going on. And it doesn't feel so real. We're not in it. We're watching it happen.
Yeah.
So, where can folks find you?
Like in life?
Like on like your website and your Instagram.
Yeah, so you can follow me. Andrea has tagged me. Go back and look at the stories and the posts for this talk. But my Instagram is DaemonumX, and that's all social media. Content warning, my online accounts are full of kink, so if that's not for you, don't go there. But I do also sell my link to zine on my website, which is fistzine.com, fistzine.com.
Amazing. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
This was fun.
This was so fun. Cool.
How do we stop?
Oh, yeah. And now.
And
share to story.
yay.
Cool. Yay. That was so fun.